Hi, I'm Captain Steve Chaconis, and one of my favorite ways to fish in the summertime is a hollow-bodied frog. It's taken decades, really, for this frog to catch on. It was invented in the 50s, and we tried to use it, but we didn't have the right equipment. The equipment that you need is braided line. You've got to have braided line, and you also have to have a stout rod, and I think a faster reel, 7-to-1, maybe a little bit faster, so that you could bring in that bait and make another cast with it. Today we're going to try out this frog from Ish Monroe. It's Ish's frog. It's got popping frog. It'll pop, but the interesting thing about it is that the skirts, different than a lot of other frogs, come straight out the back rather than at an angle. So you can see these legs come straight out the back. That allows it to walk a little bit better, has less resistance. Also the hooks, what I do with the hooks, I grab a pair of pliers and I open the gap a little bit. I'll grab that hook gap right there and I'll bend it open just a little bit more so that the hook sticks out just a little bit above the bait. So we're gonna get out on the water today. We've got sunny conditions, wind, no wind, water's in the upper 70s, and we're gonna go find some grass and catch some bass. When I'm throwing it and catching fish with it, it's my favorite way to catch fish. But it is a good way. It also tells you if there are fish around for a couple things. One, yeah, you'll see the obvious. You'll see fish blow up and maybe they miss your bait for some reason. But the biggest thing is that it makes you slow down and work inside of a grass bed and look at it. And you'll see movement. You'll see stuff that if you're throwing any other kind of bait, you know, pitching or something like that, you're only going to see what's 5, 10, 15 feet in front of you. With this, I'm watching it, you know, 20, 30 yards and watching it come back to the boat. And in that zone that I'm looking at, I'm able to see what the fish are doing, if they're moving around, swirling. A lot of people don't know much about hollow-bodied frogs. I'm going to call them hollow-bodied. The snag proof was the first one around. They've been around since the 50s, 1950s, and they're really the pioneers in making frogs. And they've got so many, and they've had some of the best frog people design their frogs. But before we get to that, let's talk about why it took so long for bass fishermen to really embrace frogs, because we couldn't catch them. The fish were blowing up on them and we could not hook them. And the reason we couldn't hook them was because of rods, but more importantly, line. When you had monofilament and had as much as 30% stretch, and you're throwing these things a country mile, and you get a bite at the end of a long cast like that one, if I get a bite out there, I can still set the hook on them because I've got no stretch in my braid. And I like using 50 or 60 pound Gamma torque braid. I tie a double Palomar, so I go in, I double the line, I go in through it once, and then I go in through it again, then I tie my Palomar, and I finish it off with 2 half hitches. And that's pretty much how I tie the knot on these things. And the rest of it is just casting it out there and working it. And I like this one. This is an Ish Monroe frog. He designed this for snag proof. This frog, I think, it's a popping frog, and I think it's the best frog made. What it does is it doesn't have a channel where the hooks are entering the body. So the hooks have their own channel here, and the body doesn't have water coming in through the hooks. It also, like you see, is got a popping thing. I also try to bend the hook points up just a little bit. Open that gap up so it separates from the frog. You also want a soft frog, and it's got a little weight in the back. Also on this, the legs are in the dead center of it rather than sticking out to the side. This also doesn't interfere with hookups. And that's the whole thing about frog fishing, is doing everything you can to keep the bait from preventing you from catching fish. And that can happen very easily with a frog because number one, some of them are really hard plastic and they don't compress. If the frog doesn't compress, then you won't catch any fish. It'll just be basically a weed guard to keep that fish from being able to get stuck by the hooks that are on there. And keep in mind the other thing, these are very strong hooks. they're designed for hauling fish out of grass. So you've got to have a stiff rod. You've got to have no stretch line, because if you don't have both of those, you won't be able to get these thick hooks into the fish from a long distance, especially. I get asked a lot if you have to use a bait caster. You can use a spinning rod, but there are two issues with a spinning rod. One, the reels are not as fast. You want a faster reel, 7-to-1 at least. And the rods are not really designed for this kind of heavy vegetation. So if you find a rod, you could go with it. For my clients, I used to use spinning rods. The reels, the fastest I could find were some of the Quantum Smoke reels back when they were still doing them. And then the rod, I found some Fenwick rods that were pretty stiff, and I had my clients use those for frogs. So it wasn't something that I did a lot for my guide clients, because it's a little difficult. The skill level is higher because of the hook set. That's the main thing. You could detect the strike, but the hook set was a little bit tricky for a lot of people to come up with, being able to set the hook right away, get it coming up out, and just horse those fish up using a lot of muscle to get them to come up. Some guys will smack their baits in the water to get rid of the grass. I don't like doing that. It tears up the baits, you know, but I'm not in a hurry. Now, one of the things I will do, I won't smack it in the water, but I will put it down and give it a quick little pop like that, and it gets rid of most of it. You gotta be careful you don't hit your buddy with it, though. They get mad and they won't pay for gas. And you don't have a buddy anymore. If you're throwing something that's not an Ischus frog, you have to constantly be squeezing to get the water out. This has no water in it. That's just the water from the skirt coming off. And again, the way he designed this skirt, the whole frog, I mean, it's brilliant. I've never seen somebody design a frog and make so many improvements. And there are hundreds of frogs out there. I don't think there's any company out there that doesn't have a frog. Booyah became well known for a time because everybody was using the frog early on, I think, because one of the guys caught a lot of fish with it. So after that, everybody started to perfect them a little bit. Some of the modifications I'll do to these things is, instead of rubber legs, skirts, I'll put rabbit fur in there. I'll go ahead and put it all the way in, tie a knot in the center, and then have it come out the other side. It holds up pretty good, but the nice thing about that, I like that better for open water, because I could just let it sit and that rabbit fur never stops moving. It just literally just continually undulates. The hairs on the ends of the strips will pulsate and move around, showing a good bit of life. There's one right there. Now, that's one of the ones I started to watch a little bit more, because they've been slurping it. I don't know why they're not committed. So this is a ball of grass with a bass. A little wad of grass on here. Now you gotta be real careful. You get them like this, because as soon as I pull that grass off, that fish is coming to life, because he did not have to expend any energy. See that? He didn't have to expend any energy when I was bringing him in, because he got engulfed in that grass and there was nothing he could do. And little guy, but we're learning, and you take this to wherever you got grass and use it. But that guy slurped it, and I was ready for that, because I've missed a couple of those slurping bites. Before we started shooting, I caught a few that just really exploded on it, and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to do a little tutorial on this, because a lot of guys are intimidated when they come out and they see mats like this. Okay, it's afternoon. Sun is just about straight up, and this is when I really like the frog, because the fish they will be in these grass mats. They won't be anywhere else. They won't be swimming around the outer edges a whole lot. They're going to be in them. That sun is going to drive the bait fish out of view, and they're going to be hiding in the grass. Some of the bass fry from the spawn will be in there, and if the fish are eating at all, they're going to be in there. They're going to be in there whether they're eating or not. You just got to make them eat. Put a frog in front of them like this. And all I'm looking for when I make my cast now is I'm looking for thick, dense vegetation. The best time to fish a frog, a day like today where you don't have much breeze, you've got sunshine, you've got thick matted up grass. There are fish in here that never see a lure all summer because guys are afraid to come over and fish it. It's just pretty dense. You can't fish it any other way. You got to really fish it with a frog. And you got to be confident to go back and forth until you come over one's head and they'll come up and get it. And then you better be ready. Your hook set's important too. It's straight up hook set. You don't want to set the hook to the side on these things, because if you do, you just pull the fish into the grass. What you want to do is pull the fish out of the grass. Now, I'm on a clump of grass right now, and I'm just kind of popping it there in the open water close to that grass, because if there's a fish that's underneath that grass, I'm trying to get him to come out and get this. Once it gets, I don't know, about 20 feet away from me, I'll go ahead and bring it in, make another cast. I like a faster reel because of situations like that where you're going to reel the bait in. I think we should get a bite coming up on that clump. It looks pretty good, because you want to reel that bait in between casts and be able to make another cast and keep your bait in the water as much as you can. And the whole idea is to cover water, cover it. The best thing to do sometimes, you'll see a scum line where your line is dragged through the scum, and that tells you where you've already fished. It also, when a fish blows up, it'll leave a hole there, and you could actually see where that fish blew up and cast over that area again in case you missed them. So if you had mono on this cat, there's just no way. And I remember back in the 60s when we were using these frogs, Mann's had some, but basically Snag Proof was the company. And you'd get a bite and you would rear down after you counted to 100 or whatever it is you told us to do back then. You'd reel down and you'd feel that fish, and you'd set the hook with all you had, and the fish would jump and it would throw. It wouldn't just spit that bait, it would throw it. It would just rear back and launch a good spiral too. These fish back then were very proficient at releasing these frogs. But it got to be very frustrating when you had a fish back then, and everybody had a couple of them, but you couldn't catch fish with them. You just couldn't. And braid is the big difference. I will say it over and over and over. When I see people that are using a frog without braid, you got to be careful when you give fishing advice, because men have fragile egos and they get upset when you tell them that they should be using braid. And I've always done it this way. I catch limits. I've won tournaments with monofilament. Well, maybe you have. And you got to watch around the bait too, because sometimes you'll actually see the water move off the back of the fish as they come charging to it. So they'll come to the bait and you can see them coming. But the other time that I'll stop the bait is if I hear a fish blow up somewhere. I don't want to keep moving my bait because I don't want to get a bite while I'm looking, so I'll stop that bait for a second. In the old days, we used to, say, oh, well, you got to count to 10 before you set the hook. No. I'm sure most of you have seen bass before, and of all the bass you've seen, do they have hands? No, they don't. They have a mouth, and when they bite it, it's in their mouth. That's when you set the hook. No counting, no nothing. And the ways to tell that you've got a bite, there was one right there. He just sort of sucked at it, didn't quite get it. But the way you could tell you got a bite is, you can see it. Like I could see that one. He came up and nudged it right there. Didn't really get it in his mouth real good. The second way is that you see the line moving out. that means he's come up. Sometimes they'll just come up, suck it underneath the surface, and when they do that, they'll, you know, go, did I get a bite or not? And then you see the line move, reel down and set the hook. And the other way that you know you've had a bite with a frog is they try to rip the rod out of your hand. You better be setting the hook on that one too. But I try to throw to an open area, get that frog moving into, don't try to land on that really thick grass. And I expect my bite to come right about there, right when you either leave a grass edge or come up onto another one. So I will hesitate it there in those areas just a little bit. And when you hesitate a frog like that, that was a good one. You see that one? He came up and torpedoed this thing. And again, I didn't wait. I did not wait. I said, hey, come to Papa. Now, you want to make sure that when you set the hook straight up. And here's why. Look, see the hooks coming up? They come up straight up when you set the hook. It's not going to be on the side of their mouths, okay? And we'll just get this guy off and see if we catch another one. Not very big, but heck, it's fun. Better than not catching anything. And like I said, I love this frog. This is absolute favorite frog. It's got every feature that you would want in a frog. Everything from the soft plastic to the way that Ish designed this frog. I hate to keep bringing up Ish, but in my opinion, he's the best frog fisherman. I know there's some other ones that are pretty good, but my money's on Ish. He's put a lot of thought into it, did a lot of fishing on the California Delta. He's done real well on the Potomac River, tidal Potomac River. And if you're going to fish the tidal Potomac, you better have a frog tied on from basically May all the way into November. You could catch them on a frog. You might also get a surprise visit from a snakehead, but you've got to be ready and got to have them. Color. I've seen frogs that, gee whiz, even a frog would probably take out to dinner. They look like frogs. They got little legs on the side of them. They got all kinds of stuff, you know, slit for the eyes. They're really a replica. Well, white or black, take your pick. On a sunny day, I like white. If it's cloudy and I know that they're still in that grass, then I'll go ahead and use a black one, or in the evening, low light conditions, I'll use a black one. But for the most part, for me, if I only had one frog, it would be white. And if I only had one time to fish, it would be during the heat of the day, you know, right around noontime till 4 o'clock, you know, when it's the hottest part of the day. That's when I want to get out here with the frog and really let them have it, let them get a good look at it, and see if you could catch a decent one doing it. This will also be, most of the time, the biggest fish of the day will come on your frog. And most tournaments on the Potomac River, which is a noted grass fishery, I mean, if you're not in the grass, you're not catching bass. And it's a noted grass fishery, and if you're fishing it, the frog is going to produce your bigger fish. You're going to have 3 to 5 pound fish on a frog. If you fish the outer edges and you start using Senkos, you might catch more fish, but now you're talking the 1 to 3 pound fish. So your bigger fish are going to be in there because they could just sit there and they could feed off of everything that's in the grass. I don't think this bait replicates anything except in the grass. You have a lot of decaying material and you have a lot of crawfish living in the grass. And I think this movement like this, skittering across the grass and being in a real thick area, I think that indicates that these fish, that there's food there. I just had one come up and try to hit it when I swam it out of the water. So we're in a good spot. Now, do you see what I just did there? That's mending the line. I don't want a big bow in my line so that when I'm popping it, that the bait is going, you know, following the line. I want it to follow straight. And there you go. Big old clump of grass with it. But you got to set that hook right away, and you got to keep them coming. So white frogs are much easier to see. You could focus on them the entire cast and see it all the way back to the boat. And that's really important when you're frog fishing. You can't stress that enough, that if you don't watch your frog, you're going to miss a lot of bites. You can't be looking around going like, oh, where's my other rod? What am I doing? What am I going to do next? Most of the time when you see floating grass or topped out grass, the sun blocks the light, so stuff underneath it doesn't live. So there's a cavern under there, and that's where those fish are. And this is probably about 2 to 3 feet deep, with the grass on top maybe about 3 inches. So there's a good 1.5 to 2 feet of space underneath these grass mats. So plenty of room for the fish. There he is. Pop, stop. Hook set straight up. Not even thinking about it. Not a very big one, but there we go. Takes all sizes. 12-inch fish. You see the hook set is straight up. The hooks are coming out straight up. So that's a straight up hook set. Gets those hooks right up through the top part of the mouth and starts to pull them out of that grass. If they start to get into that grass on you, you're never going to get them out. I mean, it takes a lot. You got to go to them. But that's it's just your 12-inch fish. I'll take it. Take it all day long. It's a frog fish. Rid it. One of the reasons you don't like to fish frogs in the wind is that it puts a disturbance on the top of the water, and the frogs kind of get lost in there, which is why with most of my frogs, I haven't done it with this one, I'll put a couple of 10mm glass beads in there, actually 2 of them, and as you're popping it, they just roll around and they'll click on each other. They'll hit the hook shaft on some of your traditional frogs. I haven't really tinkered with this one to put any rattles in it, but that's always a good thing to have, I think. Just add those rattles. Usually I stick them in through wherever the hooks come out. There's usually a place to jam them in. Just spit on them a little bit. That lubricates them and gets them to slide in for you pretty easy. Those power poles really help you be disciplined when you're fishing grass, because you can sit in one spot and really cover an area. And if you get a bite and you're moving, you can put the power poles down and usually stay in that same spot, especially if you miss that fish, because they a lot of times will come back, because you usually don't stick them. They'll just blow up, and it tells you pretty much where they're located. Sometimes you just look for the hole in the grass. Most of the other times I just kind of put the power poles down and replicate that cast. Some people like to let their baits sit. I don't really believe in that, because I've had so many fish hit it as soon as it hits the water. I don't think the splash scares them away. So when that thing hits the water, and I do try to flatten it out a little bit on my cast. So I mean by flattening it out, I thumb the spool down so the bait will just sort of land flat instead of going, it'll go splat instead of big splash. When the frog lands, what I do immediately is I still have my thumb on the spool to let line out, but I'm controlling it as I pull the rod back. The grass is holding onto my frog for me, so I can line the line straight up between me and the bait, so I don't have to worry about mending it. In a lot of cases, I could just go ahead and start fishing it. But if you don't, you can always lift it up and do like you would with a fly rod. Just lift up the line and move it to the opposite side so that your line is straight. Because if you start working that frog, it'll actually start to go in a circle, in a loop anyway, and that loop will put a bow in there, and it'll make it harder to get a direct hook set, because you'll be pulling up on that big bend in the line as it loops loops around, you want it to be straight so you can come straight up with your hook set. But if it's looped around, it's kind of hard to get a good shot at that. Any advantage you can get with a frog, take it. And I'm gonna put my power poles down here. Nice thing about power poles is that I have a foot pedal in the front that I can control my power poles, and I double tap it and the power poles go down and hold me in a spot. So when I'm moving along, especially when I've got this breeze and I really want to work the bait slower, you know, not have to catch up to it and figure out, you know, where the bend in my line is. Faster reels are better. Get that frog back out there. And I'm just tapping the rod, trying to make that bait shake and vibrate over their heads. And when I get to an open spot, I kind of hesitate just a little bit. That frog, all it has to do is move left or right, and those legs are going to entice a fish to strike. See bait fish running for their lives. A little bit of swirling. Predator fish, largemouth, hopefully, in there, wanting to eat a frog. You don't want to eat a frog? Boy, this thing really walks. Back, forth, left, right, left, right. There he is. Big clump of grass with a little fish. Getting into that real thick stuff. Now you have to remember, this fish is not tired because he is encompassed in grass. He's going to start to do his thing right here at the boat. Yeah, he's rested down. Up we go. Again, good hook set. Hook set right in the roof of the mouth. Hooks are right up there. There's that frog and that fish. Good 1.5-pound fish. Looks like he's been through a spawning ritual. There's got some scales that are where he's been fighting off other, like bluegill, the evil bluegill. All right, guy, go back in there. Thank you for your help. Well, that was a lot of fun. We caught a few bass. We learned a few things. Take the pointers, and like I said, one of the things that you really need to do is to focus on getting a white frog. A white frog is something you could see, something you could react to better. Learn the hook set. You don't wait. You don't count to 100. When that fish has it in its mouth. You can either see the fish take that bait in, or the line start to move, or they yank on the rod. Set the hook. Follow some of these tips and you'll be a better frog fisherman. If you have any questions, you can always contact me at nationalbass@aol.com. Thanks for watching. Tell your friends about us. Subscribe. Thank you.